facilities that make this program possible are provided by the City of Highland Park and have been made possible in part by Ravinia Festival, CJE Senior Life, GAN Music and Sound.
Hello and welcome to Cahnman's Current Events Roundtable. Today we have a very exciting guest. Maybe you can call it a little nepotism, but I am introducing my brother-in-law, Alderman Sam Cahnman from Springfield, Illinois. And the reason I'm having Sam on the show is because I feel that we really need to learn about Illinois politics. We get a lot of foreign politics, we get a lot of politics from around the United States and other countries, but it seems like we don't get enough Illinois politics and what's really happening in the state of Illinois, our own state. And so I want to welcome our guest today, my brother-in-law, Alderman Sam Cahnman. Welcome.
Thank you, Suzanne.
I get a shake? Thank you.
Great to be here. And lovely. I love Highland Park. It's a great community.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And Sam has been really involved with Illinois politics, being an alderman. He's really put together a lot of wonderful things that has happened for the state of Illinois. And one of the things has been even a really thing of my own, because years ago I went to a tanning salon with my daughter, and it was before we really got anybody gave us any directions. We were in a tanning booth and without goggles, and we got second-degree burns all over our body, and I had to have a cataract operation for both of my eyes when I was in my 30s, and this was caused by being in the tanning booth. And Sam, I want to talk to you about how did you get, which is very important, Illinois to ban indoor tanning for minors under 18 years of age. And I applaud you for that.
Well, thanks. But first of all, this was a group effort. Many people worked on the passage of this bill. It wasn't just me. But what happened, the genesis of this is that I was sitting on my computer late one night, and I saw an article where the city of Chicago had passed an ordinance banning tanning with the ultraviolet tanning beds at these tanning salons for those under 18. And I looked into it, and I have a good friend in Springfield who's a dermatologist. He's actually a professor at the Southern Illinois University School of Medicine there, and I asked him what he thought about should we ban under 18 tanning for in the city of Springfield, or try to get such an ordinance passed. And he said absolutely. And I researched it, and I found how dangerous it is especially to young people, because it greatly enhances the risk of skin cancer, including melanoma, which you can die from melanoma. And so I introduced the ordinance, and in the city of Springfield, I think it was in June of 2011, and initially it wasn't received that warmly by it was kind of about 50-50 by the aldermen. Some were for it, some were against it. And we had a hearing.
Why would they be against it?
Well, people feel that this should be the parents' responsibility. This is government playing big brothers. These are the arguments against it. But it's no different really than we have, you have to be 21 to drink alcohol. You have to be 18 to purchase cigarettes, 18 to purchase a lottery ticket, to get a firearm owner's identification card. So there's a lot of things that we have age restrictions on, and that are dangerous for our young people. If you're under 18, you don't really, the dangers are so great from tanning that it's not something that we should allow our young people to do, just like cigarettes and drinking. So in any
So
event,
how are they going to enforce it? Like if they go, say a young person goes into a tanning salon, are they going to card them? What, like they do alcohol, or how are they going to do this?
The tanning salons have to determine that before they can allow somebody to go into an ultraviolet tanning bed now, they have to determine how old the person is. They have to make a determination. They have to look at some ID. And if the person doesn't have any identification, photo ID that shows that they're 18 or older, they cannot tan.
And it should be a photo ID because people could be using other people's IDs.
Well, what happened was we eventually did get the law passed in the city of Springfield. Actually, we had a hearing first on our committee of the whole, and there was we had probably more people come to that city committee meeting than any other meeting. And then when we brought it up at the city council the first time, I didn't feel I had the votes, so I postponed it. I put it back in committee until I was sure I had the votes. I got the support from the Sangamon County Medical Society and the American Dermatological Association, Illinois Dermatological Association.
In fact, I see a letter to thank you for the Illinois Dermatological Society and its patients are grateful for your efforts to amend the Tanning Facility Permit Act and your dedication to countless teenagers from a harmful effect of indoor tanning beds. And I think that is really commendable because people don't realize what's happening. I mean, you see this, the kids lay in the sun for hours, and I mean, all these things that they're doing to their skin, and when you're in your 30s and 40s, you get a payback.
Well, keep in mind, laying in the sun is not nearly as terrible as going to these tanning salons, because the tanning salons, the rays that they put on the skin of these teenagers is 10 times as powerful as the sun.
Wow.
In addition, the sun isn't around all the time. The sun is only there
during
the summer, warmer
right.
months, and during the day.
Yeah,
but you can go to these tanning salons all year round, and they're open, into the nighttime when you can't go out. So the danger from the artificial tanning is much, much greater than sitting out in the sun. That was another argument that was used.
I'm surprised that the parents don't even know this. None of us know this. It's interesting because no one talks about it. No one knows about that. And people think that, I'm going to go, I'm going to Mexico or I'm going to Florida and I'm going to go into tanning so I don't get, so when I sit in the sun, it'll be better for me. And that's what a lot of people do before they go on vacations. They go into these artificial tanning salons and they get, their self-tan because they think that it's going to be better for their skin. Meanwhile, it's worse for their skin.
Right, that's what the dermatologists tell you, and that's a myth. You go to the tanning salon before you go on vacation in Florida in the wintertime. But so we did pass the ordinance in the city of Springfield back in September 2011, and it became law in the city of Springfield on January 1st, 2012. Prior to that time, there had been efforts by state representatives, including Robin Gable, who's a Democrat from right around here in Evanston. She had been the primary person behind trying to get a statewide tanning ban
bill enacted. Is it statewide now?
It is now, but
now let me just ask, what are the ramifications? What happens if somebody allows a child and they said, that's okay, you can come in? What are the penalties in case this happens?
Well, there are fines. I'm not sure what they are, but so what I was starting to say earlier was the effort to pass it through the state. I mean, in the previous session of the Illinois legislature back in 2011, Robin Gable didn't even have enough votes to get it out of committee, and this time, or didn't have enough votes to pass it on the floor, or get it out of committee. And there have been efforts prior to that, always unsuccessful. Once we passed it, and the city of Springfield and the city of Chicago had passed it, I think that what laid the groundwork to get it enacted in the state legislature, and it flew through the House and flew through the Senate, and even one of the most conservative Republican senators from the Springfield area got behind the bill.
That's
So,
wonderful that we could work with both parties. I think it's very important that this is not a Democratic thing or it's not a Republican. It's both parties, and to safeguard our children, because our children, what we don't know, will really hurt us and will hurt our children and our grandchildren. And also, Sam, while we're talking about bans, you also were. I want to talk about the other ban that just came up. The Illinois bans electronic cigarettes for minors. And, a lot of people are smoking these electronic cigarettes thinking that it's, it's better than smoking a regular cigarette. And it's just as dangerous, except the one thing that it doesn't have is tar. Can you talk a little bit about electronic cigarettes?
sure.
too?
I just wanted to clarify that with the tanning ban bill, it was signed into law by Governor Quinn on August 15th, but it actually does not go into effect until January 1st,
Okay.
2014. So right now, today, as we speak, if you're under 18, you can still legally tan with the signed written consent of a parent or guardian. But after January 1st, 2015,
Okay.
2014, it
Maybe
will
we
be
should
illegal.
not have said that. Maybe we should have just let it go, and then they think they can't get into
Well,
tanning.
you gotta,
So,
you
yeah.
gotta be accurate, I
I
think, and
know.
tell the truth.
I
Now, on the
know.
electronic cigarettes, that was something that back in 2011, in January 2011, I introduced an ordinance in the city of Springfield to prohibit the sale of electronic cigarettes to minors under 18. And the reason I did that was because there was a loophole in the law, and as you said, these electronic cigarettes have all the carcinogens and toxins of regular tobacco cigarettes except the tar, because there's no burning, there's no fire. So
Now, does it affect people like secondhand, like myself? I don't smoke, and I'm sitting next to somebody with her electronic cigarette. Can those vapors go into my body as well?
from what I know, I don't think they can, or if they did, it would be very, very limited, because all it is water vapor, and it dissipates very quickly. It's not like smoke that hangs around.
But it can
So-
cause them effect. It can cause the person that's smoking it. It can be.
Well, this person that's smoking it,
Yeah.
it can detrimentally affect them, and that's why I introduced the legislation to ban the sale of it to under 18-year-olds in the city of Springfield. And at the time, we actually had an alderman who was a medical doctor, and he was gung-ho, for this. He was actually a cancer doctor, and he knew firsthand the dangers of these electronic cigarettes. And then later this year in 2012, a state representative from Chicago, the Chicago area, introduced a bill to ban the sale of electronic cigarettes statewide.
For minors.
For those
people
under 18.
At 18 and under, or under
Exactly.
18. Can they still get it? They can get it at 18, but 8 underneath.
17-year-olds.
17-year-olds,
So
okay.
just like tobacco,
Right.
the sale of tobacco cigarettes is prohibited under state law to those under 18.
And this is the host state of Illinois.
Yeah, and again, this was signed into law at the same time by Governor Quinn on August 15th. I actually happened to be there at the
Wow.
signing ceremony over at the.
Who would think, now they came out with electronic cigarettes, and they thought that those were safe, and
Well, they're not safe, but they aren't as dangerous as tobacco cigarettes. So between the two, it's probably better to smoke the electronic, but the best thing is to not smoke either.
why do they feel children they're minors and they shouldn't be smoking this? Did anybody do a study? Was there a study done on these?
I have seen some studies, but I don't know them off the top of my head. The Federal Drug Administration is reviewing, has a proceeding going about electronic cigarettes, and they probably will be coming out with some regulations. They may regulate, or they may prohibit the sale of electronic cigarettes all across the country, but we'll find out about that probably, I understand,
Can
in
people-
February
Yeah.
of next year.
Can they bring them into restaurants? Because you're not allowed to have cigarettes in restaurants.
I think the Indoor Smoking Act that prohibits smoking tobacco cigarettes indoors, I believe that only applies to tobacco cigarettes. It does not apply to electronic cigarettes.
Maybe that would be another thing that you could do, is to limit that to restaurants and hotels as well, because, when people are smoking them, they look like a regular cigarette. And so people are getting the wrong impression that people think that they're smoking a regular cigarette.
Well, also, just like before we had the statewide smoking ban, any business establishment, any restaurant that wants to have its own rule they could prohibit the smoking electronic cigarettes in their particular business establishment.
And also, you also were very influential. I want to get all your goodies that you've been doing. I mean, that is really good. And when I see this, to help any child or people, most people don't get these laws, together, and I think you have done a really good job about it.
Thank you.
And one of the things I congratulate you on, you toughened the DUI laws, the ignition interlock devices. You allowed judges to order, not only, they used to use them on, on offenders that would offend many more times than one offense, and you got the DUI offense on one offense, the judges to order the use of this on first offenses.
Well, what happened was initially I was representing a company that manufactured ignition interlock devices and AutoSense.
And also tell our viewers a little bit, what is the interlock?
The ignition interlock device is a device that can be put on the car, and it's hooked up to the ignition system, and then before starting the car, the driver has to blow into this device. It's like a breathalyzer. It measures your blood alcohol content, and if you blow at a level that's over what it's preset for, which I think in Illinois it's like 0.5, so it's below the legal limit of 0.08, the car will not start. It also makes an electronic record every time you blow into the car, the time you blew into it, and what you blew. And then the Secretary of State can review that later, and they can determine, if you tried to start your car when you were drunk or over the limit.
Let me just ask you just a hypothetical question. It may be, it may not be. But what if you have what if you are driving and you do have an alcohol content inside you, and you don't want anybody to know, and you have your passenger? Can your passenger blow into the device and get the car started?
Theoretically, that's possible, but that's a violation of state law. In addition, these devices have a periodic. Every so often while you're driving, they'll tell you got to blow in again.
I see.
And then if you blow too high alcohol content in at that time, the car will lock up after a certain amount of time. It gives you time to pull over to the side of the road. So you would think if you have a sober passenger with you, they knew how to drive, you might as well just let them drive.
Right.
Now, what I was responsible for was initially getting a pilot program passed. This was for people who had their driver's licenses suspended or revoked, and they were trying to get a restricted driving permit, and then the restricted driving permit was conditioned on getting the ignition interlock device installed in their car. Later, I got legislation passed with the help of now Senator John Cullerton, who is now the president of the state Senate. He wasn't at that time, but he's a very big proponent of drunk driving legislation, anti-drunk driving legislation. With his help, we got another law passed that said that when you're a first offender, a DUI offender, usually you get court supervision. And that law, which was passed about maybe 10 years ago, gave judges the authority to order an interlock device as a condition of court supervision or as a condition of a judicial driving permit. Now, the law was changed a few years ago. I wasn't involved with this change, but this was also sponsored by Senator Cullerton. And now it says that anybody who gets a DUI, even first offenders, if you have a summary suspension, if you blow 0.08 or higher, or if you refuse to blow, your license is suspended automatically for a certain number of months.
Now, what if they have to go to work? What if they have to work?
Well, it used to be that you could get a judicial driving permit, and pretty much they gave them out to anybody, and then you could use that to go back and forth to work. Now the law was changed to say you can get a different kind of permit. It comes from the Secretary of State. And this permit, you have to have an ignition interlock installed in your car, and you can drive anywhere you want, which makes sense because the problem we have with these repeat drunk driving offenders is not they're driving while they're sober. They're just as good a driver as anyone else. It's when they're intoxicated. So what the beauty of the ignition interlock device is, it lets the offender drive as long as they're sober, when they could drive safely or would drive safely. But if they're intoxicated and impaired, it stops them. And so it's, this is terrible havoc on our society. Drunk drivers, so many people killed, 50,000 people killed a year. It's very, unnecessary deaths and injuries.
So that is something that, that's good. That was something that you got together, and it has saved, probably this ignition interlock device probably has saved many people's lives, not only the driver, but people that were hit by the driver.
Or passengers.
And passengers, and also, and you also, you were also responsible for, you used to be at Cub too, I remember. You used to,
Citizens Utility Board?
Yes, co-founded the Citizens Utility Board, which is called CUB, C-U-B, and it saves consumers millions. And you were one of the people that started the Citizens Utility Board.
Yeah, I worked with Pat Quinn, who's now our governor.
Yeah, I know. He started at the CUB too, I remember.
Well, I worked together with him, and we initially started with getting advisory referendums on ballots all across the state on whether people wanted a Citizens Utility Board. Overwhelmingly, including I spoke to some village councils here on the North Shore, and overwhelmingly everywhere this appeared on the ballot, people said, yes, we want a Citizens Utility Board to represent us in these rate cases before the Illinois Commerce Commission, because up till then it was very one-sided. The utility companies had all the money and the lawyers and the resources to present their case and get their rate increases through the Commerce Commission, but nobody was in there really going to battle for the consumers. So we initially, actually, I was representing Pat Quinn and a administrative proceeding at the Illinois Commerce Commission to try to get Commerce Commission to establish a Citizens Utility Board by administrative rule. But then at the same time, there was a bill that had been introduced in the state legislature. And while I was proceeding with the proceeding in the Commerce Commission, the legislature passed the bill, and the governor at the time, I think Thompson, signed it into law. And the Citizens Utility Board was established, and I was actually served on the interim board of directors. I was appointed to the interim board by House Speaker Michael Madigan.
See,
I'm
very proud of my family. Look what they're doing for everybody.
And I served as vice president of the interim board, along with Howard Lerner was the president of the board.
There was something that you sponsored just recently, or I don't remember when it was, but it said an ordinance to prohibit sex discrimination by clubs in Lake Springfield, which became law this summer. Some of the clubs, which are city-owned land, had bylaws prohibiting women from being members. That is a biggie, because there's a lot of golf courses that they're private golf courses that in Georgia, and wouldn't allow women to participate in golf tournaments or be part of the club. And how did you do this one?
Well,
this is good. Applaud for women. We have to applaud for women.
Well, I saw an article in the newspaper about there's a club on the Lake Springfield called the Motorboat Club, and that they had a provision that women could not be members, though their husbands could be, and if the husband died, the widow could maybe take over the membership for some period of time. And all these clubs that are on Lake Springfield was built by the city of Springfield I think for the power plant, and it's a lake, it's a recreational lake, and all the land along the lake is owned by the city, and it's leased out to some of the land has residences, and some are these clubs. And I saw something in the newspaper about this discrimination, just blatant discrimination against women. And generally with private clubs, there's nothing, the Supreme Court has held they can do what they want. But these were private clubs on public property that was leased from the city of Springfield. So I introduced an ordinance to prohibit any private entity which leases land for public purposes on from the city of Springfield. They cannot discriminate based on race, sex, national origin.
Are they obliging? Are they?
Yes, we passed the ordinance, and they're now complying.
Very good.
And
Very
I thought,
good.
did you want to talk about the open primary?
Yes, we have 5 minutes. I'm glad you brought that up. I was just thinking about the open primary. Tell her, what an open, a lot of people don't know what it means, an open primary, closed primary, and what's the difference between having an open primary, say in the state of Illinois. Right now we have a closed primary. It's called a closed primary. So maybe to explain to our viewers out there what exactly is the difference.
Sure. What happens in Illinois when you go to vote in the primary, where we're going to have coming up in March of 2014, you have to tell, before you can vote, you have to tell the election judge out loud in the polling place, I want to vote, I want a Democratic ballot or I want a Republican ballot. Then they have a record of every voter. They mark it down in your voting record that you asked for a Democrat or Republican. That's part of the permanent record. Anyone can come back after the election to the election office, look that up and see whether you picked a Democratic or Republican ballot.
And it can really hurt people on jobs too, because I talked to somebody when I was down in Springfield, and they said they lost their job because I guess they were given their job by one party, and they found out, because it becomes public record, who they voted for, and they lost their job because of it.
That's happened. In fact, after Quinn became governor, when Blagojevich was impeached, and he established this Illinois Reform Committee, which was to try to figure out reforms that could help prevent things like what happened with Blagojevich in the future. And one of the measures that was recommended by this Illinois Reform Commission, which I think our current Lieutenant Governor Simon was on, and I believe Kennedy, the guy who's from the Merchandise Mart, nephew of President Kennedy, was on it anyways. They recommended that the adoption of the open primary to combat patronage and prevent intimidation of public employees by party leaders. Now, in an open primary, which a number of states have, including Wisconsin, Iowa, our neighbors, you go into the voting booth, you are handed a ballot which contains both the candidates running in the Republican primary and the Democratic primary. And initially, you have to pick which party primary you want to vote in, and then you just vote in that party. If you vote in both parties, your vote would be voided. So it's a secret. Nobody would know what.
There's a lot of states. I think there's about 14 states that have
and
that.
If it's electronic voting, if you vote on a computer, they could just have you punch a button. Initially, you want a Democratic or Republican ballot, and then it comes up on the computer screen. So that way, there's no record of how you voted, and it would be a truly secret ballot. What we have in Illinois in the primaries is not a secret ballot, because anybody could find out how you voted in terms of.
And it's very hard for people that are independent, and they have to choose, and it's very, very hard. Many of my friends are independent voters, and they have to be asked, do you want a Democrat ballot or do you want a Republican ballot? And it's very hard because, as an independent, you really don't have a choice.
And I spearheaded an effort to put advisory referendums on the ballot all across the state in 2006, and about 21 different jurisdictions, or more, maybe about 25, had it on the ballot. The question they were asked was, shall Illinois adopt an open primary law allowing voters to cast a secret ballot in primary elections by eliminating the current requirement that voters publicly declare their party? So everywhere it was on the ballot, people voted between 75 and 80, over 80% voted yes. In one jurisdiction, it was 83.73% yes.
I know, in Moraine Township.
In Moraine Township,
I actually put that one on the ballot, too.
Yeah, I think you went to the township board meeting and asked them to put it on the ballot.
Right.
And it was 81.3%.
And yet, how come it doesn't really go through? I mean, everybody really wants it. Oh, my goodness. And I see where everything's coming down right now.
Well, the political bosses don't want it, and
Yeah.
they're in control of the legislature
Well,
right now.
Sam, I want to invite you back because we really didn't solve our everything, and I think by the time you come back, you'll have so many more ordinances that need to be done. And I really appreciate you coming to Cahnman's, and I pronounce it Cahnman, and you pronounce yours Cahnman.
Cahnman, and the one
The
politician-
Cahnman can, right?
Right, and the one politician who has fought for the open primary is Governor Pat Quinn.
Yeah.
He actually did an mandatory veto to try to establish it.
Yeah, because
But
I
it was-
think, people feel a little bit better about it. Again, I want to thank you for coming. Come back and join us again.
Okay, well, thank you.